Something stinks in the state of Michigan. I am not big on politics at this point. I don't care too much about year-by-year election results. I don't follow election horse races like I used to. But something ain't right here. They've taken out now 6 Republican candidates who are running for governor, and not just nobodies, major candidates. And Dems can gloat all they want and say Republicans are election fraudsters and they're criminals, and that's why they get kicked out of elections. But why is there so many candidates getting taken out, and why are they all in Michigan, and why are they all Republican? I already talked about before, I think, how 5 Republicans were just ripped off the ballot, completely disqualified from the race, because the state of Michigan decided to do a strict signature match check and concluded that that there were not enough legitimate signatures on the ballot petitions for 5 of the, I think, 10 Republican candidates. And so those 5, including the far and away front runner, this guy James Craig from Detroit, who had already raised something like $2 million, I think, for his election. He was the fundraising leader. He was the front runner by far. He and 4 other guys just completely knocked out of the race. And, I looked at that and I thought, gee, this sure seems strange. And obviously they were not that strict with their signature match checking in the 2020 election on the very ballots, but they're very strict on checking the signatures for ballot access. See how that works? You would think that actual votes you would check more stringently than just the petitions to put someone on a ballot. You would think you would care more about about the legitimacy of the election itself rather than the legitimacy of who gets to be on the ballot. You would think, if anything, you would lean towards having more people on the ballot. Obviously, you want there to be some barrier to entry so that you don't get 1,000 names on the ballot for governor. But if people generally are, if you got 10 people that qualify, you don't really need to call that and go over it too stringently. But clearly, they wanted to take out, as many Republican candidates off that ballot as possible, including the front runner, who I don't know how credibly, but, perhaps he was perceived as a threat. After all, this is the very same governor of Michigan who had the FBI stage a fake kidnapping plot to boost her image. The FBI entrapped 5 unsuspecting autists and convinced them that it was a good idea to kidnap the governor of Michigan. Now, these men never actually kidnapped her, and it was totally the FBI's idea. And the guy who, was sent in as a mole to try and rile these guys up and convince them of this idea turned out to be a wife-beating swinger. Thankfully, in the end, the truth about that case was exposed. I called it correctly, I believe, all the way back in 2020 when the story first broke. I said, hey, back then, this story's bullshit. It is not, it's going to turn out that this was an FBI plot. This is too perfect. It's happening it's breaking 2 weeks before the election. Yeah, right. And now I'm saying again about the state of Michigan and the gubernatorial race, although there was no election. She wasn't up for re-election back in 2020. She's up for re-election this year. I'm going to call again. There's some bullshit here. Now, I don't know about, maybe the signatures, were worth being thrown out for those 5 Republicans. But this 6th guy, after all that, they threw 5 guys off the ballot. Then the next frontrunner, the guy who was getting 19% in the polls after they took a new poll and half the field got wiped out, the guy who was leading in the polls now has just been arrested. They're throwing him in prison. The FBI is coming after him next. Just like they came after those people to try and smear them to build up Gretchen Whitmer's image back in 2020. Now the FBI is again intervening on behalf of the governor of Michigan for some reason, boosting her image by painting her top challenger at this point as an insurrectionist because he attended the rally turned riot on January 6th. I don't know exactly what he did on January 6th. I'm not totally sure what they're accusing him. But considering they've charged 800 people and they've locked them all up in prison for a year now, over a year. I'm highly skeptical of these charges against him now, especially coming so late. Seems to me that the FBI would have had plenty of opportunity to arrest this fierce insurrectionist who's had a very public profile prior to the point in which he started leading in the polls. It almost looks like the FBI took him down because he's leading in the polls, and they decided to say, okay, what can we dig up about this guy? Just like they, when this other Republican was winning, they said, okay, what can we dig up about him? Why don't we try and stringently check all the signatures for his ballot access petition? And then they found, oh, hey, there's enough signatures here that we can throw out, and we can disqualify him. So you're disqualified. Now they come to the next front runner, and they say, okay, what can we do on this guy? Well, his signatures looked good. He had, we can't kick him off the ballot. Let's see. Oh, he attended January 6th. Let's say he's an insurrectionist, and let's charge him with sedition or something. That's what this looks like here. And all I have to say is my thoughts and prayers are with Tudor Dixon and her family, because it looks like, based on fundraising and past positive comments from Trump, she might be now the new front runner after 6 out of 10 candidates have been kicked off the ballot, or have been taken out of the race in one way or another, whether they were kicked off the ballot or removed from society and thrown in prison. Who knows what they might do to this woman? Really, I would not want to be running for governor of Michigan. It's not looking good. And so, if you're in Michigan, or even in America more broadly, like I am, how are you going to look at this and say, you know what, when Gretchen Whitmer eventually wins re-election because they've taken out everybody who's running against her, and she's either running unopposed, or the Republican nominee ends up being some nobody that didn't even have any funding, who won by default because literally everyone else in the race was disqualified or thrown in prison? Do you think that the voters in the state of Michigan will really be able to look at that and think, hey, this is a legitimate victory, especially when it's, the victory of a woman who locked them down in their homes for, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years, something like that, who appropriated all of their civil rights, decided that, mother knows best, and that she was going to come in like the president of the Homeowners Association and say, you know what, how dare you go out and mow your grass? Don't you know you're only allowed to mow your grass on Saturdays and Sundays? Today is a Wednesday, and you are creating unnecessary noise. We all agree we only mow our lawns on weekends so that we can enjoy the peace and quiet Monday through Friday. And she basically did exactly that. People were not allowed to mow their lawns in Michigan. And then I bet the local government would come to them and say, hey, your grass is too tall, we're foreclosing on your house. That's the state of Michigan under Gretchen Whitmer. She is the quintessential Karen, with the power of an entire U.S. state behind her. Now, that doesn't account for the FBI's strange interest in trying to help her. It is odd to me that now twice in a row, the FBI is interfering in politics to try and elevate the status of Gretchen Whitmer, either by tearing down her opponents or making her look like a victim. But at the end of the day, it's hard, very hard, to consider an election like this to be legitimate, even at this point. Because let's say this woman who now will probably lead it, who's probably got the best chance of winning the nomination now, Tudor Dixon, let's say that she's able to get the nomination and she beats Gretchen Whitmer somehow. She doesn't get suicided. She doesn't get arrested. She doesn't get disqualified from the ballot. Let's say she makes it past all that and becomes the next governor of Michigan. Even then, is her victory that legitimate? Because there were 6 other people in the race who could have beaten her, or at least 2, because we know, I don't know if those other 4 guys who got, other than James Craig, who got booted in the first round of the purge, I don't know if they were polling ahead of this Tudor Dixon woman at the time. But let's just say at the very least 2, James Craig and this Ryan Kelly guy, we know for a fact, polling ahead of her at the time in which they were taken out of commission. And so, is her victory even that legitimate? Again, as a voter, people are losing their choices. Their choices are being taken away. These people aren't losing at the ballot box. They are being removed from the race by bureaucrats. And so who knows? Maybe all this isn't just to help Gretchen Whitmer. Maybe this is to help maybe the people, behind the scenes who are. It's because clearly this is a concerted effort. It's not one candidate, not two candidates, but 6 candidates now have been removed from the GOP primary in Michigan, and only in the gubernatorial race. And so clearly there's something going on here. And maybe what's going on is there is some kind of concerted effort behind the scenes to try and make sure that Tudor Dixon is the next GOP nominee. I frankly don't know. I don't know enough about her. I don't know if, she is favored by the deep state or by the Michigan bureaucracy. No, I couldn't help but notice Tim Pool's also talking about this today, and of course he's connecting it to, oh look, Civil War imminent. And a lot of people make fun of him for that. I've talked about that in the past. I don't talk about it so much anymore because I grew tired of it. I think I've said my piece on it in the past on how I think that the United States will come apart. I probably should revisit the topic more than I do. My thoughts are different than Tim Pool's. I think that I line up differently. I kind of agree, I guess, in the direction that, yes, the U.S. civil society is breaking down and it will no longer continue to function at a certain point. It is being pushed to the limit. But as far as how that happens and what it looks like, I tend to disagree with him. But this election in Michigan, I think, clearly pushes us in that direction because, leaving aside the facts of the case, it looks bad. It looks bad for the state. It looks bad for the FBI. This looks like a concerted hit job on the Republicans in that race. It looks like an attempt to take them out. And that delegitimizes the imminent result in that very election. And it will denigrate the elections in the eyes of those voters in general, in other elections. And that will mainly affect people in Michigan, but if this becomes a more high-profile race, I think that perhaps that will affect people in other states as well. They will look at that as as what they would call a rigged election. And, Dems on Twitter can argue until they're blue in the face or until their fingers bleed from typing that, oh, no, this is all totally above board. The Republicans are just that bad. It's just a coincidence that there happened to be 6 people who, needed to be kicked out of the race because there's just that, when you're talking about Republican candidates, they're just all that bad. And from a Democrat perspective, that might be true. But for Republican voters, if the people that they want to elect continually now in the future just start getting disqualified from races or arrested for political crimes, Republican voters are going to start to think that, this political system is just not for us. This is a political system which exists to elect people who hate us. And we need to reform or replace, alter or abolish the current system so that we can achieve proper representation. That's the ultimate conclusion that people will reach. So I hope people understand that. You can't just do what you want and disqualify your political enemies because you think that they're too far afield. When you draw a hard line like that, what you do is you make it impossible for there to be any center to bridge the gap between the two sides, and you have two opposite opposing sides, which are, is an artifact of our bipartisan political system that encourages political disintegration, which is something that I'm for, frankly. I think everyone in this country would be much better off and much happier if we did not have to share all of these laws and political institutions. I mean, look at this gun control law that was just passed by the House. Now, this is a law that won't even make it past the Senate, but it is a compromise upon compromise as far as the gun grabbers are concerned. They didn't get anywhere near what they'd like. The gun grabbers would like to completely outlaw private gun ownership, except for maybe deer hunting, which for some reason they prop up and don't have a problem with. I don't know, maybe it's just a straw man. But their goal would be to, eliminate private gun ownership and give all the guns to the cops so that guns only exist to kill black people in the inner cities. That's what Democrats think guns should be used for. And of course, the average Second Amendment advocate, of which there are many, who have that, who are single-issue voters based on the Second Amendment, who are pro-Second Amendment. That is a big block of people in the United States. They want all restrictions removed. And so this bill that made it through the House that won't make it through the Senate, it adds red flag laws, which are terrible. It adds, raising the age to buy a rifle to 21 federally, and it makes it so you can't buy more than a 15-round magazine. Which, when you think about it, those are really moderated, and frankly, they're half measures compared to what the gun grabbers really want. In a divided political system, we could have, colloquially speaking, red areas where people have all the guns they want, and then we could have big blue cities where people have no guns. They live in utopia, and they're all getting shot on a regular basis, either by gang members or the police. But hey, so be it. If that's what they vote for, if that's what they want. But when we settle things at a federal level or even a state level, nobody's happy. Nobody gets all of what they want. And that's because we have irreconcilable differences. People, the so-called American people are worse off together than they are separate. We're all in a toxic relationship with one another. And that's understandable. It's hard to make a marriage of 320 million people work. And frankly, we can't do it anymore. That, to me, is the real message of this story out of Michigan. In a normal, healthy, democratic republic, you do not have candidates being locked in prison before an election for past attendance of political rallies. That's the kind of thing that you see in Zimbabwe or Brazil or Iraq or Egypt, but it's not something that you see in a functioning democratic state. The United States cannot exist as a democracy at this point. And so people are going to have to choose. Now, of course, what I mean by democracy, I mean like the textbook definition. When you hear people like on the January 6th committee talk about democracy, they're talking about transatlantic globalist hegemony. And so those are two very different things. So I don't mean democracy, in scare quotes. I mean democracy as in government chosen, via elections that are held in which voters have some say in choosing who their leaders are and what they, what kind of leaders they want and what ideas they want them to espouse. At this point in America, nearly half the country holds ideas which relegate them to the status of enemies of the state. Their ideas are considered so far out of the mainstream that they are enemies of the current regime. And so the current regime cannot allow them to seek democratically elected positions because there's a chance that they might win, and their very election jeopardizes the regime which has existed in this country since the end of World War II. A lot of people like to, talk about 1776 and 1791 and or 1789, when the Constitution was adopted. Yes, we still have the same Constitution in written form, but we've had multiple different regimes which have governed this country. The United States of today is not the United States of 1791 or 1800 or 1828. The America that we know today traces its history back to World War II. It is a corporatist empire hell-bent on world domination, and anyone who doesn't want to go along with that, or who thinks that those goals counter their own goals, and that hey, maybe we should make other decisions, maybe we should prioritize different things other than world domination. People like that have to be purged from the elections, because at this point they are becoming a threat. So, with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.